us today. How are things going with special teams so far in camp?
I'm the last guy you want to talk to at this point in camp. There's still so much to do. I'm really pleased with our team athleticism. We've got a lot of guys that can run around really, really well, but there's still so many special situations to get through. I still am learning our personnel as best I can. Coach Traylor is tremendous in that, trying to help paint a picture of the full, guy. But every time you're putting in, 6 different units, there's going to take some time to get the vocabulary right, some of the organization right. I think we've got some really good, solid specialists. I think we've got some really good young specialists in the pipeline as well. Our older guys have done really, really well, taken to everyday coaching, which is not the way it is everywhere, but they've really embraced that and done a really good job. And some of the role players are kind of rising to the top. So we're trying to still in the process of learning who we can trust and who we can put in those critical situations on teams.
With the place kickers and the punters specifically, how have you seen those guys work through this fall camp?
They're doing really, really well. That's kind of a unique relationship for a specialist. It's for you guys that play golf, with a swing coach or a quarterback with a quarterback coach, there's got to be a level of trust that's developed that way because you've done a certain thing a certain way for a long time. So it really took a big leap of faith for Lucas and for Hunter, and now with Everett and Colby, to really let their guard down and just embrace what it is that we're trying to do. And they've done that as well as any group I've ever been around. They really want to be good. They really want to be coachable. They really want to be leaders on this team. And I think particularly with Hunter, he has taken on that role. He doesn't mind barking at some linebackers or some DBs or wide receivers if they're not taking care of business the way they need to. So I've really been proud of the way he's taken on that mantle of leadership. And Lucas he's my first Aussie. I've always kind of looked at him from afar and go, that'd be really nice to have, to play with and do some of those interesting things that they do. His mentality is not the same as a lot of guys that were dyed-in-the-wool football guys, from Texas. But he's not very easily shook at all. He wants to please. He wants to do a really good job. It just takes a little bit different connection with Lucas in order to get him to where we need to do. But there's no lack of work ethic. There's no lack of wanting to embrace everything new and everything different. So Lucas has really picked it up well. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Everett play a little bit this year either. He's done really, really well. He's got a great leg, strong leg.
Thanks, Coach.
Sure.
Hey, Greg, you're up.
Coach, what's the challenge been like for you of getting the team ready to go on special teams without having spring available? Is that typically an important time for you guys?
It's critical. The spring is so important for us on special teams, just kind of figure out who your guys are. And, with no spring, no work going into it, just trying to watch guys run around and lift weights, try to figure out who they are, it's been a challenge. It's funny just geographically how the profile of most of your team looks. You have a group of guys, mostly predominantly from this state, but really all over the South. Man, they like to be coached hard. They like to be pushed. They like to be pressed. There's so many young guys that are athletic on our team. The challenge for me really has been to slow it down. And Coach Traylor's had to many times has told me during the period, hey, Tommy, chill out, because there's so much work I'm trying to get done. There's so much identification I'm trying to get done in our 2 periods of practice. But I think that's probably is just the challenge of learning the skill set of all the guys. I read an interesting article, I think it was ESPN, on my guy Joe Judge, and they don't put any names on the back of their jerseys. They don't put any numbers on the front or on the back if they can. Right now they have to, but if they can, take all those numbers off. To just try to watch guys how they move to identify them that way. And that's where I'd like to try to get to during this short amount of time, is be able to watch him how he moves, what his skill set is, and help him figure that out. That's on top, man, of backed up punt or obvious onside kicks. I mean, there's so many things that we're trying to get done in, and Coach Traylor's carved out a lot of time with our walkthroughs and with all of our practice periods to try to put it in. But it's mental overload for those guys right now. They're doing well. They're doing well.
So when you guys are getting your players on the field for the first time in the fall, I imagine the offensive and defensive depth charts are coming together slower than they would in a typical year. Does that have like a trickle-down effect to special teams where you're not really sure what guys you're going to have in a given set?
Yeah, and that's still a process. I mean, starters on offense and defense are going to play on teams. That's going to happen. But I also don't want to be silly. And if there's a middle linebacker that's getting over 75% of the plays on defense, he doesn't need to be on all four core special teams. That's not smart for Coach Nix. That's not smart for Tommy Perry. That's not smart for anybody on our football team to put a player in that situation. So, and all those things are not exactly set in stone yet either. So to answer your question, that first day of punt, we had, 6 deep on every position, just trying to figure out who could do what and when and where. And Coach Traylor, I think, has done a good job of slowing things down and say, hey, we're going to need a 3 or 4 deep. If somebody, does test positive and there's contact tracing, all around him, and we have to pull a number of guys off the field, we got to have a group of guys behind ready to fill in and know what it is that they're doing. So typically you got to prepare for injuries. Now with COVID, you got to prepare for injuries and illness so that you can continue to play a football game if most of your guys are still healthy and can get it done in a safe way. So I guess, we're still trying to figure out exactly who those starters are and who those backups are. But then also those starters, what share of the plays are they still getting? And I'm just trying to keep my head above water as best I can.
What has been the biggest difference going through camp with all the precautions and protocols that have been in place for the pandemic?
Yeah, it's probably that not having a spring. I've never been in that situation where I didn't have anything and I just dropped at the beginning of fall. An install calendar is very near and dear to every special teams coordinator's heart because you got to have every situation and every phase of special situation for every day that you have a practice. And you do it all from beginning to end. And then you look it over during the summer. That first game has moved so many different times. That's changed my whole schedule. That's changed my whole calendar. So that's been difficult. That's been interesting. The meeting space, being spread out, that's been unique. That's been different. That's been interesting. And then just having fail-safe plans. We've got to have a 3 deep at every specialist position. I've talked to guys around the country. I know they probably wouldn't be real happy if I told you where they were from, but I've talked to special teams coordinators that are still playing around the country, and some of them, I talked to one guy, he has no specialists. He has no specialists because one guy or maybe 2 of them tested positive, and everybody in that room was contact traced out. So they can't practice any special teams other than with the jugs. So that's really, really tough. So trying to make sure that our guys are practicing social distancing and trying to train up our punters to be able to hit an extra point, trying to be able to train up our kickers to be able to hit some rugby punts if we needed that to get us through the game, for a 3 deep and a 4 deep at every specialist position. That's been kind of unique.
Do you personally feel totally safe with going through the season, or where do you individually stand on that?
I think when we first showed up, I think everybody is that way. And unfortunately, it's that way in society too. Everybody starts off and, they're doing temperature checks and everybody's doing a really good job washing their hands and wearing their masks. And then a couple days later, you kind of get lax with it. And you'll see a restaurant where they're not doing as good a job of cleaning up or checking your temperature or when you go in. The biggest thing that gave me the most confidence was our last round of testing when everybody came out clean and came out clear. I moved from downtown San Antonio, and I'm now kind of in the Alamo Heights area. And you walk around, and there's a lot of people that are nervous, and for really good reason. Because of the amount of testing that we do and because of the good job that our street coaches and our trainers do, I can honestly tell, my kids, You know, when I see them at night, I go to the safest place in San Antonio because we could test our athletes, we could test all the coaches, we could test all the trainers and everyone. And I know it's expensive, and I know everybody in the community deserves to get that and to receive that. But right now, with us having that privilege to get that done, I can feel safe going into work. And more importantly, I can look at those young men and my daughters back at home and say, you know, we're doing the very best we can, and I'm actually in a situation that's a lot safer than any other place that I know of because of the amount of times that we get tested. It's not fun, but it's reassuring, I guess, after it's done.